Welcome back to my read-along of A Tale of Stars and Shadow. Today we're up to chapter 31, and after the ending of the last chapter, let's get straight into it. Strong arms wrapped around Talyn's waist, and she was hauled bodily towards the surface. Her head broke into clear air, and she gasped for breath, the arms still locked bruisingly tight around her. The water in her lungs stifled her breathing, and she convulsed, gagging. Focused on the burning in her lungs, the choking need for air, she barely noticed as she was towed through the water. Her rescuer struggled against the strong current, but he or she was fresher than Talyn, and managed to drag them both out of the water's grip and up onto higher ground. The arms loosened from her waist, and she slumped into the mud, spitting and retching river water until her lungs were clear. Her entire body trembled. She'd been inches from death. Once she'd emptied her lungs and stomach of muddy river water and could breathe again, she dragged herself to her hands and knees, then forced herself to her feet, wanting to know who'd plucked her from the river. A man stood nearby, as soaked and covered in mud as she was, watching her carefully. His face was hidden by a dripping black mask. The usual cloak hung, soaked through, around his tall form. How had he swum in that? Didn't realize you had a death wish, Captain Talyn. Shocked, she backed up a step, the effort launching another coughing fit. Shadowhawk? What are you doing here? Instead of responding, he looked her over. Are you all right? I'm fine, thanks to you. She paused, then a sudden urgent thought occurred to her. What about the children? Were they swept away too? Are they all right? He nodded, raising a hand to forestall her flood of desperate questions. I got them clear before you, though it meant you almost died before I could get back to you. They're safe, just over there. She glanced at where he pointed. The twins sat with their arms wrapped around each other, looking scared and cold, but very much alive. Her shoulders sagged with relief. Another few breaths and she had the strength to lift her head and study him for a minute. Despite being as disheveled as she was, he was breathing easily. You saved my life. I did, he nodded. Are you all right? No crippling injuries? No, she visually checked herself over. I'm fine. What are you doing out here? Well, you were the one who sent Zamril to rouse my network to help clear people out of the slums. He flashed a smile. Thanks for that, by the way. But I'm here, same as you, Captain, to help where possible. You saved their lives as well as mine, she gestured to the twins. Thank you. All in a day's work. More glibness. Now, there are fishermen stuck out at sea who are returning with the day's catch when this wild weather started up. So if you can walk, I'm going to leave you to get the children to safety and try and round up some more of my network to go and help them. She hesitated. She should be doing more, asking him questions. But she was still exhausted and shaken, and the children were in danger of getting ill if they stayed out in the wet and cold too much longer. So instead she just nodded. I'll make sure they're okay. Goodbye, Captain Talyn. He paused as he turned away, glancing back. And thank you for your help tonight. You and your wolves saved many lives that I could not. He strode off before Talyn could say another word. She limped through Dock City, a twin clinging to each hand. She avoided Wharf Street in the hopes patrolmen would be busy sandbagging and not wanting to interrupt them. Since the wolves had left Corin's home hours earlier, someone had been out lighting covered lamps along the main thoroughfares of the market quarter. Not that she could see anyone. Rain drove across the empty streets, pattering incessantly on the cobblestones. Her knee was swollen and aching, and her body wouldn't stop trembling. After what felt like an interminable period of trudging through the sleeting rain, the twins helpfully calling out directions, the hall came into sight. The road curved upwards to where a large brick structure stood on a section of high ground close to the base of the wall. Lamps lit up the area surrounding it, and she trudged towards it gratefully. A wall of warm air and the hum of conversation greeted her as she walked through the open door. People filled the large space inside, more sitting huddled in small groups, many wrapped in thick blankets. Fires had been lit at both ends of the hall, casting a rosy glow over the interior. Talyn shivered, eyes closing momentarily as warm air brushed over her skin. The twins' father had been hovering anxiously near the entrance. At the sight of them, he let out a cry and opened his arms. The twins let go of Talyn's hand to bury themselves in their father's embrace. Talyn appeared in front of her, wings rustling in agitation, relief evident on his features. Thank goodness you're okay. You took so long. We were afraid. Captain! Corin's shout of greeting almost drowned out Talyn's words, given even more effect because he was usually such a quiet-spoken youth. Theac strode at his side, Halun not far behind. She was surprised by how relieved they seemed to be at her appearance. How's the sandbagging going? She asked. You can worry about that when you get warm. Talyn waved a nearby man over and muttered a few words. In a few moments he was back, carrying a thick blanket. Here, get this wrapped around you. What about the warm first? Talyn said firmly. The Shadowhawk has organised some of his network to help here. They've arranged dry clothes and blankets for the survivors and are getting started on hot soup and drinks. She took the blanket Talyn was insistently proffering. The Shadowhawk? Corrin smirked. The city patrol are too busy sandbagging Wharf Street or looking after their own homes to notice. Okay then, we need to... I sent Ty to go up and check with the Falcon. Figured the lad was the least likely to offend anyone up there, Theak said. The Falcon assured him that Prince Kewin is safe. He's posted some Falcons to keep an eye on him until the weather calms down. Her mouth opened, closed. You did? He nodded briskly. Prince Kewin is still our responsibility, Captain, and it's my job to take care of things when you're not available. Talyn swallowed, reaching out to grip his shoulder in silent gratitude. She'd almost died earlier, and now she was suddenly, truly, wonderfully glad that she wasn't. That realization rocked her, made her grip tighter than she'd intended, but he didn't seem to notice. Thanks, Theak. Talyn found a quiet room and quickly changed out of her dripping clothes into some dry ones Corrin had found for her. When she was done, she felt a little better, but her knee throbbed painfully. She limped out of the room, surveying the scene before her. Halun was lugging large piles of chopped wood in to keep the fires going. Theak was deep in conversation with Andros Ty and another man she thought must be the War Quarter patrol commander. Samaral had appeared, carrying mugs of steaming drink to those who didn't have any yet. And most surprising of all, Talyn moved between those laid out on pallets, attending to injuries without hesitating over the fact that it was humans he was helping. A flush of pleasure warmed her body. Her wolves were good men. She was proud of them. She looked around for Corrin and spotted him approaching her, carrying a steaming cup. Here, drink some of this. She cupped both hands around its blissful warmth and took a long swallow of the deliciously sweet kavi. Its warmth spread through her, and the blanket and dry clothes helped, so that she felt she might finally get warm again. Shall I get you another one, Captain? Corrin offered once she'd drained the cup. No, leave it for everyone else here. There's plenty for me. Captain? Talyn approached, concern still written in his face as he studied her. I noticed you limping before. Did you hurt yourself? I got swept away by the rapids. My knee smashed into something. Sit down here, Captain. He motioned her to a crate and she did as he bade, glad to rest her aching legs. Once she was settled, he pointed to her left pants leg. Do you mind? Go ahead. Talyn knelt gracefully before her, wings resting loosely on the floor to either side of him, and with deft fingers rolled her pants up above her knee. It was swollen and purple, the bruising livid. His hands were cool as he gently palpated the injured area. You've strained some ligaments, but I don't think you've done any permanent damage. I'll give it a treatment now, but you'll probably need a couple more before it will be fully healed. His hands moved gently around her injury, eyes sliding closed in concentration. Talyn began to relax as warmth spread through her knee, and the sharp ache began to fade. She let her head loll back to rest on the wall behind her, eyes on Talyn as he worked. Suddenly his head flew back, eyes wide with shock, and he made a cutting motion with his hands, physically shifting away from her. She was so languid it took a moment for her to realize what was happening. By then Theak had already barked. What is it, Talyn? Captain, your magic. His voice trailed off, something like shock and horror and wonder all mixed together filling his voice. What magic? She blinked at him. He frowned. There's a wound in your magic, a wide, gaping wound that festers. What the hell are you talking about, lad? Theak demanded. Ignoring him, Talyn turned pleading grey eyes to her. What happened to you? I don't know what you mean, she said, genuinely puzzled. You must, he insisted. My healing magic. It uses my body's energy to help heal your physical wounds. But your magic is torn open just like a physical wound, like a ragged gash deep inside. It's not healing. Captain, I've never seen anything like it. Her gaze caught on his, not knowing how to respond to his obvious distress. I don't know, Talyn. My Callanan magic allows me to create a shield of light like you've seen, that's all. It's not winged folk magic. Talyn looked up and around, seeming to notice that the other wolves were staring at him in concern. He turned back to her, and whatever it was he'd been thinking or feeling faded away. He cleared his throat and shifted closer to her. I'm sorry, Captain. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll keep working on your knee if that's okay. Please do, she encouraged him. Whatever he'd been doing had felt wonderful. Talyn's face was a mask of concentration as he worked on her knee. She wasn't exactly sure what he was doing. His hands performed quick movements around her knee without actually touching it. It's oral healing. Talyn looked up as Theak spoke, lifting an eyebrow in query. It's part of winged folk magic. Some of them have the ability to heal by working on the aura of a person. It's far more efficient and powerful than normal healing practices. Talyn is very talented. There was no dislike or even the usual hint of contempt in Theak's voice as he spoke of the winged wolf, just a surprisingly genuine respect. Even so, Talyn flashed him a mildly irritated look. There's actually a lot more to it than that. But yes, Captain, those are the basics. Talyn finished a few moments later. He made a cutting motion with his hands, then stood, his wings flaring for balance. The swelling around her knee had lessened substantially, and the pain had dulled to a faint throb. Even the bruising didn't look as severe. She flexed it gingerly. No pain, just stiffness. That's amazing, she smiled in wonder. Talyn, you're a marvel. Halun appeared before he could respond, a frown on his face that drew the pattern of his slave tattoo tight over his cheekbones. Andros Ty was at his side. He gave Talyn a smile of welcome despite the grim note to his voice when he spoke. The patrolmen and the townsfolk have managed to block up Wolf Street and Parlour Road, but the levees flooded just a short while ago, and now the flood is threatening by another route. Sailor Road? Corin asked. Ty nodded. But we don't have enough to hold it. The man sandbagging in the two other locations are only barely keeping the waters back. The rest of the patrol is still up at the Citadel. We can't spare any of them to go to Taylor Road. Talyn stood, expecting her knee to hurt, but it didn't. We'll go. 5 of us is better than nothing. Hopefully the rains will stop soon and cut us a break. There are 6 of us, and you aren't going anywhere on that knee, Talyn said, suddenly assertive. She shook her head. You need to stay here and look after the sick and injured. My knee will be fine. It doesn't hurt anymore. No, he shook his head stubbornly. I'm one of the wolves. That's what you keep telling us, right? That we're a wing? Talyn hesitated, the same warmth from earlier filling her chest at Talyn's declaration. A lump appeared in her throat, and she had to clear it before speaking. Yes, that's right. Then I'm coming with you. Give me a few minutes and I'll find something to strap your knee with. Talyn hurried off, not noticing the stares of the other 4 wolves on his back. None of them said a word, but something indefinable had shifted. Theak cleared his throat, turning back to Talyn. These people are wet and exhausted, and some of them are ill or injured. Who's going to hand out blankets and hot food and drink if we go? I think I can manage to run things here, Ty interjected with a smile, and let's have some faith in the city folk to help out their own. He's right, Talyn said, shooting Andros a grateful look. It's warm and dry in here, and that's the main thing. They're all going to be a lot more trouble if Sailor Road floods. Halun reappeared. He was carrying Talyn's Cullen and cloak and boots. We carried these back with us when you went after the children. I've managed to mostly dry your cloak. You'll probably need it. Thanks, she said gratefully, replacing her blanket with the cloak. She felt better as soon as its weight settled around her shoulders. Talyn arrived soon after, efficiently strapping Talyn's knee with some odd sort of stretchy material she'd never seen before. He caught at her arm as she went to follow the others, his voice dropping to an undertone only she could hear. I can't fix that deeper wound, Captain. That will take time and skill that I don't have. But I know you were lying back there. From what I saw, I honestly don't know how you function day to day with a spirit wound like that. Spirit wound. Sorry. She'd been a fool not to realize what he was talking about. The knowledge swept through her like a tide, and she had to fight not to rock back on her feet. Unable to speak, she simply gave Talyn a nod and hurried after the others into the rain. The rain was falling as strongly as ever. It beat at her the moment she stepped out, and she glanced longingly back at the warm interior of Town Hall. Then they turned a corner, and all was darkness. How are we going to get sandbags down to Sailor Road quickly enough to be effective? She asked Theak. We're not in the poor quarter anymore, Captain, he said, a note of bitterness in his voice. When the sandbag storehouses were set up, the planners put them close to the danger points in the market, dock, and war quarters. Sailor Road is the main link between the west bank of the Rush, where a lot of the smaller fishing boats dock, to the residential area of Dockwater. There's a storehouse right where we're going. Not long after, they rounded a corner to see water lapping up a wide side road, sloping downwards towards the western bank of the river. The warehouse stood at the top of the street. Theak's quick shove showed the doors were locked. Talyn glanced at the rising water level, then at Halun. Can you break them down? The big man cracked his knuckles and nodded. He walked to the doors and leaned against them, pushing all of his considerable strength into bursting through. The wood bent inwards but didn't open. Halun strained harder and Theak joined him, but it wouldn't budge. After a moment, they stepped back. It must be barred on the inside, Theak said. Solid steel, I'd say. You're serious? She stared at him. 6 thrices. The insanity of it killed her. Zamrul swore, gave the doors a good kick. It didn't help. I don't fancy standing in the rain and staring at the door while the water laps at my ankles, Talyn said. And here I was just beginning to think humans might be as smart and capable as us winged folk. Zamrul can do it, Corin said suddenly. He'd been standing a little apart from them, gazing up at the windows. Zamrul spun, the surprise on his face turning into a secretive little smile. Corin matched the smile with a grin. You're telling me the best thief in Dock City can't climb up there, break through a window, and unbar the doors from the inside? Those windows will be locked, the yak said. Zamrel and Corin both turned to give him a scornful glance, but it was Zamrel who spoke. I've gotten through 100 windows a lot more secure than those. How will you get up there? Talyn asked, genuine concern in her voice. She'd seen Zamrel's agility firsthand, but the rain was still pouring down and visibility was limited at best in the dark. He studied the wall with a practiced eye. If Halun can give me a leg up to that drain, I can shimmy up to reach the lowest window. Once I'm there, it'll be easy. Without a word, Halun stepped forward and lifted Zamrel bodily onto his shoulders before moving to stand beneath the drain pipe. The thief gripped it firmly and scrambled upwards until he was just below the lowest window. Air gusted past Talyn's head as Talyn leapt into the air to hover beneath Zamrel. The thief twisted around to stare at him. Talyn gave him a little nod, then spread his arms as if to say, I've got you if you fall. Zamrel gave a tiny nod in return, then focused his attention on the window, which he had open in seconds. Talyn and the others stood huddled outside, hunched in their cloaks, trying not to shiver. It took the thief several minutes, but he managed to unbar the doors from the inside. He emerged covered in dust and coughing, shooting them an indignant look as they pushed past him to get inside and out of the rain. When Talyn took a deep breath, she also started coughing. The sandbags had evidently been in the warehouse for years, and there was dust everywhere. There were plenty of them, however, stacked from floor to ceiling. She glanced back outside. Does anyone have any sandbagging experience? We'll need to line them up between two solid points so the water can't flow around, the yak said. I'd suggest between the wall of this building and that house across the street. They both have solid brick walls. Without a word, Halun hefted 2 bags and turned to head back outside. Then he stopped dead. 3 men stood at the warehouse entrance, framed in the backdrop of darkness and sheeting rain, making it hard to see them properly. 6 people isn't enough to sandbag this road as fast as it needs to be to keep ahead of the rising floodwater, the Shadowhawk's voice rang out. Want some help? Halun turned back to Talyn, one eyebrow raised. She gave him a little nod. The big man tossed his 2 sandbags to the Shadowhawk, who caught them and headed back out into the rain without a word. The 2 men with him moved inside, heading to grab their own bags. She recognized one of them. He made carving at one of the cafes in Dock City. Corin had taken her there once. Petro? Something like that. He gave her a little nod of acknowledgement as he passed her. She shook off her curiosity and went to get some sandbags. They had a flood to stop. The 9 of them worked in a line, each stacking sandbags in their own section to make a wall across the road. Talyn worked at the end of the line, a wall on her right and Halun on her left. The former dock worker knew how to stack and could carry about 6 bags each trip, so his section of the wall rose far more rapidly than the rest of them. They were already exhausted from their rescue efforts earlier in the evening, so now they set a slow but steady pace. Too tired to talk or sing, the wolves and the Shadowhawks people nonetheless worked in silent accord. It wasn't long before Talyn's back and shoulders were aching, and her knee began hurting again. Her section of the wall grew waist-high, and the floodwater lapped up about halfway. They were just managing to keep ahead of the flow. Halun noted her renewed limp and began darping half his load next to her each time he came back from the warehouse. You shouldn't be walking on that knee, Captain, he said with a rare smile. I can carry enough for both of us. The night passed into the early hour before dawn, and still they worked. It became a sheer effort of will to keep mechanically stacking the bags that Halun dropped beside her. They just barely kept ahead of the flooding waters. Then, as blue light began filtering across the sky, the rain stopped. One moment it was pouring down on them, and then there was nothing. The wind died almost as quickly, so that a sudden silence descended on the road. Talyn kept sandbagging for a few moments before she realized. Then Halun touched her shoulder. She looked up groggily. The floodwaters were lapping near the top of their wall, but they'd stopped rising. The Shadowhawk straightened too, lifting his gaze to the sky before it returned to land on hers. I think that's our cue. It's been a pleasure, wolves. He was gone without another word, the 2 men of his network following suit. All 3 separated at the top of the street, going in different directions. Talyn straightened, swearing as her back and shoulders cracked painfully. Zamrel let out an almighty groan and collapsed against the wall, rubbing his shoulders. Is it really over? Corin whispered, his voice dry. He swayed on trembling legs, dark hair plastered to his forehead, eyes hollow from exhaustion. The yak gave his soaked-through cloak a dark look. I think I'm about to start sprouting moss. For some reason, they all found this comment hilarious. Talyn started it, laughing out loud at the words. Corin joined in next, shaking so much with laughter that he had to sit down. Soon they were all sitting there on the wet cobblestone, sagging in exhaustion against the wall of sandbags, laughing themselves silly. I need some sleep, Theak said eventually, when the laughter stopped. And some carvy. And some dry clothes, Samaral smirked. Theak snorted and allowed his head to thump back against the sandbags. Talyn dragged herself to her feet. As much as I like the idea of sitting out here in the wet and cold, I like the idea of a warm fire better. Our work here is done. Samaral groaned loudly as he rose to his feet. How far is it back to town hall? The hall was just as they left it, warm and dry. Exhausted as they were, they consciously quickened their pace when it came into sight around the corner. Talyn stopped dead just inside the doorway. All the children were sitting together wrapped in blankets in a semicircle around a small group of musicians at the top of the hall. They sat on stools. A couple were playing fiddles, one a small guitar. Another sang softly. The sick and injured had pulled their pallets closer so they could listen, and they lay there watching with sleepy eyes. The healthy adults were tending to the wounded and passing around steaming mugs of carvy and hot soup. They tapped their feet to the music as they walked around, singing along to the parts that they knew. Talyn wondered at how music was like breathing to Mithranans, and it wasn't just a winged folk thing, despite how some of them had magic in their voices. Andrus came straight over, calling out to a few of the helpers to bring some food for them. You made it. Just, Talyn smiled. Thank you for handling things here. He waved a hand. I had the easy job. Your wing saved a lot of homes and lives last night, Captain. As the wolves were gratefully accepting mugs of soup, starving after the long night, the patrolmen who'd been sandbagging Wharf Street and Parlour Road began trickling in. Despite their extreme weariness, they stood together in groups around one of the fires in the hall, sipping soup and chatting quietly. All I want to do is fall into my bed and sleep for a month, Corin yawned. But there's absolutely no way I could manage to walk up that wall. Talyn was summoning the strength to inform them that yes, they were going to have to make the walk up the wall, when she was forestalled by a deep voice behind them. If I may? She spun to find a huge bear of a man, complete with neatly trimmed but bushy beard and a receding hairline. The amiability of his expression belied his intimidating appearance. Mayor Doran, Theak straightened. Something in how quickly he'd responded told Talyn he liked and respected this man. Theak, the mayor nodded, then offered his hand to Talyn. Captain, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. I'm the mayor of this fine town. I can't thank you enough for the help you and your wolves provided last night. His lips twitched as he spoke, as if in some private amusement. Justus Doran. Talyn Dynan. She shook his hand, hers almost entirely swallowed by his firm grip. And we just pitched in where we could. It was a bad night weather-wise. To be frank, you all look exhausted. My wife and I are going to be here most of the day helping to sort things out, find shelter for those who have lost homes and so on. I'd be pleased to offer you my home to go and clean up and get some rest. Theak knows where it is. We couldn't possibly, sir. Theak looked horrified at the thought. On the contrary, it's the least we can do, Doran said gently. There are guest rooms on the second floor, and you're welcome to all of them. And feel free to make use of our bathing rooms and the well-stocked larder. I suspect once you've cleaned up and rested, you'll be looking for something to eat. Thank you, sir, she agreed with alacrity, delighted that she wouldn't have to walk all the way back to her bed in the Citadel. That sounds wonderful. The mayor's house was a block away from town hall, a brick home rising 3 stories high. One of the mayor's servants, warned of their arrival, let them in and showed them the way to the second floor. The remnants of adrenaline faded as they trudged up the stairs and separated into individual rooms. Talyn chose a room in the corner of the house, looking out on the street below and the sparkling ocean beyond. The view occupied her for only a few seconds, however. The large double bed looked far more enticing. She dropped her cloak in the middle of the floor, tugged off her boots, and crawled under the blankets. She was asleep before her head hit the pillow. All right, that brings us to the end of chapter 31. What a chapter. Now is where you probably want to drop out if you'd like to avoid spoilers in my author commentary. If you are leaving us here, I hope you enjoyed that excellent counterpart chapter to chapter 30, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next chapter. Otherwise, let's step aside and have a little chat about this chapter. Okay, chapter 31. I guess there's not a huge amount to talk about here that isn't kind of obvious in the chapter itself. This is the one where the wolves really firmly, finally come together as a unit. From the very start of the chapter, when Talyn comes back from surviving the rush, the floods down at the rush, thanks to the Shadowhawk. I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But comes back to the town hall, and without exception, they're all incredibly relieved to see her, which surprises her a little bit. Talyn works on her injured knee, comes across the gaping spirit wound of Sari's loss. And this, I guess, is the first time, at least for Talyn, that what is wrong with her is actually formally diagnosed in a way by someone who can actually sense what's happening with her. And whether she clocks it right now or it takes a little bit more to sink in, what is happening with Talyn is not normal grief. Obviously, she's incredibly grief-stricken by the loss of her partner, but Sari's loss has done more to her than just a normal kind of human grief. There's actually a physical and soul spirit wound happening there, which we know from later chapters is actually the fact that as Callanan and partners, their magic was intertwined. Sari's sudden death gave them no opportunity to untangle those bits. And so the bits of Sari that were with Talyn entangled in that Callanan bond were torn out, leaving some parts of Talyn and some parts of Sari and taking away some parts of Talyn and some parts of Sari. And that normally wouldn't happen with regular Callanan partners. But the fact that Talyn has winged phoric magic, which she doesn't know about yet, thanks to her father, that's what has caused that massive spirit wound in Talyn. And so it's not just physical grief, it's also a deep injury to her magic and her soul that hasn't and is not healing. Actually acknowledging that's what it is and what's happening will hopefully get her on the path to healing there. But yeah, so Talyn stumbles across that, lets it go for now. But then the wolves, when they hear about more flooding happening and that there's a need to go out and help, are all like, yep, let's go do it. Talyn's like, let's go do it. And she asks Talyn to stay behind to help with the injured that are still in the town hall. And he refuses on the grounds that he's one of the wolves, and he wants to do whatever they're going to do. And you can see the 4 human wolves kind of clock that with a little bit of surprise. Talyn is very moved by it. And then they head out into the rain and they stand there. They break into the warehouse with a nifty little bit of teamwork that's starting to come together now that they've kind of been forged under these crazy circumstances. The Shadowhawk shows up to help him and his men, and as a team they get that sandbagging up and running and just staying ahead of the floods until the rain stops. And finally they can head back to the town hall and rest after a really big night. I talked about the Shadowhawk earlier. He showed up to save Talyn. Now, again, the reader doesn't know this yet. Talyn doesn't know this yet, but how Kewin got down into that water with that cloak and those wings and managed to get her out, that is a feat of physical strength, particularly for someone who isn't a warrior, who isn't physically trained in terms of his athleticism or stamina or strength. He's very much the languid prince, apart from all the walking, I guess, that he gets creeping around Dock City at night, doing his Shadowhawk activities. But that was an effort of strength and will to get her out of that water and not drown them both. And it's not something that Talyn can acknowledge at this point, but from the writer's perspective, was quite the feat. Very impressive. And Talyn is there to investigate the Shadowhawk. She's identified where he is. She can find him when she needs to. But again, she makes that same choice that she made with bringing the wolves to help at the night of the floods, is that lives and homes are in danger, and whatever resources can assist to help, she's willing to use those resources irrespective of how criminal or otherwise they might be, and that includes the Shadowhawk. And that's again just a little nod to Talyn's character, and that kind of contrary theme of being an officer of the law essentially as a Callanan and willing to engage with criminals comes up a little bit more as the series progresses. But that kind of is the first sign we're seeing of that, where Talyn's more than happy to work alongside the Shadowhawk if it's for common good. So yeah, big chapter, very heartwarming chapter despite how exhausting it is for the poor wolves. If you've got any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'd love to chat about it. Please also consider liking and subscribing on your way out. That really helps me. But yeah, I really look forward to the next chapter. I hope you're enjoying this story as it unfolds. Can't wait to see you next time. Have a great day.